Hey everyone, how are you all doing? So I wanted to do a slightly different kind of talk today than I usually do. I'm going to talk about commonly asked questions and some of the more theoretical issues surrounding clinical nutrition that kind of like how to get the most out of doing a functional medicine program. All the things that you kind of wanted to know. But that usually practitioners don't tell you, not because they're trying to hide things, but just because it's complicated. They're not really thinking about it. And then I want to talk about another restoring, just how you can get the most out of a program, basically. And assuming you want to do a program, and then how long you should supplement for. Are supplements dangerous? Heck yeah. If you're going to take the position that supplements are powerful enough to heal all these diseases, yeah, they're dangerous. So you got to be, kind of know what you're doing. You can really screw yourself up. And then also the value of retesting, which is something that I'm beginning to understand in the later part of my career here. And also a little bit about clinical nutrition and ideas about absolute versus relative nutritional deficiencies. These are kind of big picture things you should just know, especially if you're interested in health and especially if you're taking any kind of supplementation. Last thing you want to do is make yourself worse. So where are we going to start? I don't know. It's a good question. Let's start with some of the theoretical stuff, and then we can look at the questions that were put together here for me, okay? So on the theoretical side, when you're using clinical nutrition to solve health problems, there's a couple of big picture items that are happening. And sometimes these terms are used called absolute versus relative nutritional deficiencies. So an absolute nutritional deficiency, the easiest way to think about that would be you haven't had water in 3 days because you're wandering across the desert because your car broke down and you're probably incredibly thirsty. You have an absolute nutritional deficit of the most important nutrient to the human body. Also, the most common nutritional deficiency that we see in functional medicine is, ironically, a deficiency of water. So you drink a glass of water, you're better because now you have some water. So that's in a situation where you're actually low on something, you consume it, and now you're better. So you can extend that outward as well to lots of other things. And let's show you some examples. You can extend that out to, let me just pull up a clear example here. You can see it's not confusing. Most of these things are quite confusing, but let's pick an easy one. Let's say that you do a lab test, and the lab test says that you are low in, zinc. So you're in the red line here for zinc. I'll draw an X where I mean. Let's say the lab comes back and you're right here for zinc. That means you're low in zinc. If you take zinc, it's going to help you with all the things that zinc does. And that you should be taking zinc until your levels are normal. That's the same kind of rationale as like putting water in your automobile, right? Your radiator. If you knew your radiator was running low on water, would you really drive 1,000 miles? No, you would think before your 1,000-mile trip, I'm going to put some water in the radiator because it's low and I want to top it off. Or if you were running out of oil in your car, would you drive 100 miles? No, you wouldn't because the engine might melt down. You would put oil in the car, right? It's like that. So why would you want to live with low levels of zinc? It's quite dangerous to live with low levels of zinc. You should get them corrected. So that's an absolute nutritional deficiency. So a relative nutritional deficiency is where the levels may test fine. Like, for example, magnesium. Let's say you test your magnesium levels and they're fine. You can still use magnesium because magnesium has a lot of therapeutic properties. So just because someone has enough magnesium in their body doesn't mean you can't use magnesium, because you can use magnesium like you would use a drug. It's a vasodilator. It lowers blood pressure. It helps prevent muscle cramping. It can really boost up people's energy, quality of sleep, improve digestion. There's a lot of things that magnesium can do, even if you're not low in magnesium. So, but where people get into trouble where people get into trouble, and I see this every day of the week, is let's say that they have read an article on vitamin E and how good vitamin E is for you, and they've been taking vitamin E for 37 years every day, and they never bother to test their vitamin E level. And here we go ahead and run a lab, gamma tocopherol, that's a fancy way of saying vitamin E, and the levels are high. That's someone who's over supplementing with vitamin E. And if you do that for too long, you can really throw off your system. It would be the same thing as putting too much oil in your, right? Then if you put too much oil in the car, just like if you don't put enough in. So just something to think about, these relative deficiencies versus absolute deficiencies as you're doing a program. And so, this kind of spins over to some of these essential questions, which is, how long should you supplement for? Well, until the levels are normal. So, for example, if someone's low in magnesium, you should take magnesium until your magnesium levels are normal. Then you need to decide, are there other reasons why I should take magnesium, right? Am I going to use it for some therapeutic purpose? Or now that my magnesium levels are good, should I just stop? And probably 90% of the time, if the magnesium levels are good, then you should just stop taking it. You're done. Okay? And so how long to take a supplement, which is probably the most common question I'm asked, requires retesting. I can't look at somebody and say, I don't know, it's been 4 months, looks like your magnesium levels are fine to me, just by looking at you. You can't tell any more than you could just look at a car and think, wow, there's probably enough oil in it. No, you check, right? You check. You have to check. And in fact, the retesting process is oftentimes even more enlightening and gives you even more information than the original labs. And I have lots of patients now, tons of patients now, where we've been testing them for 5 years, for 10 years, every 6 months, every year, and getting that amount of data on your body over time is just incredible. It's just an incredible experience to really see how your physiology is shifting around and how it's moving around and what's happening with it. So let me give you another example about supplementation to answer, again, common questions. Methylation is in the news all the time now. People always worry about methylating. Am I methylating well? Well, here are the methylation cofactors that we can test for, B12 and folate. And so if these markers are high and you're not methylating well, then you want to take B12 and folate until those markers come down, 6 months, maybe a year. Some people have genetic defects with the methylation process, with folate. Some people have genetic defects with vitamin B6. It's really common. In which case, even though you've been taking the B6 or the folate or methylfolate or tetrahydrofolate or whatever the product is that you're taking, even though you've been taking it for a while, you may have an outrageously large genetic requirement for a given nutrient, meaning some people need to take folate, some people need to take B6, some people need to take magnesium, a lot of people need to take tyrosine every day the rest of their lives because they're just not processing that nutrient properly. So we see this with B6 markers frequently. I see it, a couple times a month with tyrosine. I'll show you that. And there's nothing you can do about it. The thing about a genetic defect is, once you find one, you're like, gosh, if I just take this B6 pill every day, I'm going to be fine. You're like, yeah, pretty much. That's all you need to do. It's not a huge burden. It's usually not very expensive. And that kind of is by definition, a supplement program that you should be on. So here's a good example. This person is low in tyrosine, right? And some people are low in tyrosine because of a genetic disorder, and they don't manufacture tyrosine from phenylalanine very well. In which case, even if their diet's really good, even if they supplement with tyrosine for a year or two, as soon as they stop taking it, they're going to start to need it again. So if you do have a genetic disorder, then the answer to the question, how long should I take my supplements, is forever, as long as you want to feel well. Maybe you take a year off here or there if you just turn down taking pills, but in general, if you have a genetic defect and you want to be optimum health-wise, you want to take these products as long as you can, okay? So now let's look at, let me show you my little list here. How long you should supplement, the value of retesting. I think we covered those things. And then the question that Jacqueline just sent in is, do you consider why an individual is low on something? So the whole really background of functional medicine, the whole concept, is to figure out why someone is low on a given nutrient. Is it a genetic disorder? Is it dietary? Has that nutrient been used up for some reason? Like, for example, I had a patient last week. Maybe it was this week. It was recently. Let me find what. Just I'm not going to pull up her labs, but I'll just show you the example that happened. Yeah, here it is. So, and this patient, just within the last couple of days, tested quite low on taurine and glycate. Okay, quite low on taurine and glycate. And because I've been studying this stuff obsessively for 30 years, I know taurine and glycine are both used for neurotransmitter production, but they're also both used for detoxification. And she had a problem with her detox pathways. And I probably see a low taurine, low glycine patient once a month. It's a pretty common problem. And what that means is that the person's being exposed to some kind of environmental toxin. You need to clean it out of their system in order to get them better. Okay. And so a lot of times the labs do show through nutrient evaluation why a person is burning up or using through a nutrient. That could be as simple also as a stress hormone, right? We measure cortisol levels, and if the levels are high, we give supplements to lower cortisol. But the whole point of functional medicine, is to try to figure out why their cortisol is high and what you can do about it, in addition to supplementation, so you have more of a long-term solution. Okay. So then here's another series of questions here that have come in. Cost. So the least expensive way, in my experience, to fix various problems or just to stay healthy is to invest the bulk of your money in the lab testing so that you have really accurate data and you know exactly what you're doing. And then to try to minimize your time talking to the doctors like me, because we have high hourly rates, and to focus on a core nutritional program and to follow through with it for 6 months, usually 3 months sometimes. Some of these programs are only 2 months, whatever the time frame is. And then to do the proper follow-up and retesting so that you have a clear end to the program. What you don't want to do is discover that you're low in vitamin E and then take it for too long, right? You want to be able to stay on top of things and make sure that it works properly. And in general, if I try to design supplement programs without lab testing, even though the labs are kind of expensive, it usually ends up costing more in the long run because the accuracy of the programs won't be nearly as good. And so you don't get the benefit you're trying to achieve as quickly, and you end up taking more stuff supplement-wise for longer than you really need to. So there's an efficiency and cost savings in ordering the labs, even though the labs seem more expensive. They really like get this whole thing started. Test kit recommendations. So this comes up frequently too. So I always, in my programs, will recommend the labs in the order in which I feel like they're the most important for that particular patient. Very similar for most people, but it varies a little bit. And so it's fine if you can't afford to do an entire set of labs, to do the most important lab first. As long as you plan on doing the other ones in the future, you can step through things that way. I don't see a problem with doing that. It just drags the program out a little bit, but sometimes slower is better. Okay. Same thing with supplement programs. The most common thing I see with functional medicine practitioners these days, the younger ones, the ones that have only been doing this for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, is they just try to put people on too many supplements. And I understand why, because I did that my first 10 years also. And the reason why you do that is because you see the person needs enzymes, probiotics, they need arginine, they need magnesium, you got to fix their cortisol, they need some thyroid support, and they have toenail fungus. You want to give them antifungals. So all of a sudden you have like 12 different supplements you feel are mission critical to give them. And in the beginning years of doing this work, as a practitioner, you're really not sure what's the most important, what's going to work and not work, and you're nervous, and so you give everybody everything. You also don't want to shortchange people. You don't want to be like, well, I'm not going to give you the stuff that helps you get pregnant because I'm going to give you this other stuff that helps you get rid of yeast overgrowth, right? You want to help everybody with everything. So most of the time, most younger practitioners just give too much stuff. And what you'll see in our profession in general is as people get older and more mature in their practice, you might say more crotchety and grumpy. I don't think I'm grumpy yet. I don't know. You can ask my patients if I sound like I'm grumpy. I still actually really like my job. But as people get older and older in practice, longer and longer in practice, they get more streamlined and their programs become more minimalistic because you kind of learn what may be the priority for that particular person, okay? So you can always cut back on a program, and if you feel like you're overwhelmed by whatever your doctor's giving you, then it's reasonable to say, hey, can we just do whatever is the biggest priority or just sequence this out. And then a comment on follow-up. So, with follow-ups, a couple of things happen in terms of the patient side, right? Let's say that someone starts you on a program and you feel better. You think, I don't really need to follow up. I feel so much better. But what if the doctor is thinking, well, if she's feeling better in 2 months, I'm going to cut back on this. Or if she's feeling better in 2 months, I'm going to go and do this other program that's actually more important. So I'm constantly sequencing things in my head for patients, and I can't tell everybody everything every time, right? And so following up, even when you're feeling good, is important. Next step, there may be time for you to stop a given product, and so you just need to give the doctor a few minutes to problem solve. Now, another thing that happens is that people start a program and then they don't feel better or they feel worse, and so they don't follow up because they think it's not working. And that's horrible. I always want to be able to problem solve if a program is not working, to intercede and figure out how to make it work. And in terms of item number 5 here, like how often are follow-ups required, honestly, my first, 8 years of doing this, I would see patients once a week. Really, I did. I used to see people once a week. And then I started to get really busy. And I would look at the schedule and be like, I want to see Shirley in a week. And then I would look at the schedule and, we don't have time next week at all. And I would think, okay, how about 2 weeks? And then Shirley would go, okay, yeah, I'll come back in 2 weeks. And then, my schedule got even busier. And then all of a sudden I was looking in the schedule and be like, wow, I don't have anything for a month. So anyways, some of it depends on how much time the doctor has. In a perfect world, if all this stuff was free and everyone was highly motivated, I probably would talk to patients every couple of weeks. But based on my current schedule and how busy I am now, and also based on trying to not overcharge people, I try to check in the beginning every month, maybe every 6 weeks. And once people are rolling with the program and pretty stable, every 2 or 3 months. I find if people go longer than 2 or 3 months, then they start to, forget how to eat right, or something comes up and they need to adjust a program, or, people get a little bit lost in the weeds if you don't track them at least every couple months. Now, this is just for the lab-based programs. Obviously, if you're doing health coaching, diet coaching and stuff, then that's usually done, every week or every 2 weeks for quite some time. And then eventually, most of the patients that I work with long-term sort of graduate from the regular check-ins because there's not as much to talk about day-to-day. And we'll talk either every year, once a year for a check-in, or every 6 months if they want to do more of a maintenance program. So how long are programs? It really varies. Depending on, in the chronic illness world that I usually work in, at least 6 months to a year. We have some people, every month I get a couple of miracle stories where people are better in a couple of weeks, but usually it's a much more drawn out process than that. And some things take a long time. Like if you have heavy metal toxicity, honestly, you're looking at 5 to 7 years to get the metals out. You're not going to detox yourself of every bit of mercury and lead in your tissue, in 6 months. It's just not going to happen quickly. It'd probably kill you. So there's some things that are just going to take on the order of years, which is depressing, but true. Staying on the same supplement regimen is not always necessary. So that's part of what the follow-ups are for, right? Is that I've been doing this for a long sense of how people should be improving. And if people aren't on track, then I want to adjust the program, make it stronger, make it gentler, shift things around so that it all works. Okay. We talked about retesting already. The more that I retest now, the more valuable that I see it is. Again, it's, maybe every 6 months, maybe every year for retesting can be very important to see the, overall health benefits. And, there's 2 ways you can look at this functional medicine stuff. You can just try to get rid of a couple of symptoms with a short program. But you really want to get to optimum health and be just ridiculously fit and healthy. It's going to take time, and you're going to want to work on it gradually, and there'll be different projects along the way. It just depends on what your vision of health is. And for a lot of people, they just want to be able to sleep through the night finally, or they want to make it so that their stomach doesn't hurt and they're not throwing up every morning, But my vision of health is a little bit more than just not throwing up every morning. My vision of health is like it's hard to put it into words really, but it's more, being connected to the source of the planet, when I was on vacation in my mom's hometown in Hawaii over the summer, and, having that sense of place. I was visiting my great-grandparents' graves, and having a sense of belonging, a sense of place, and a sense of spiritual connection. That to me is really like the ultimate benefits of being healthy, not just getting rid of, symptoms. Communication, is everything, and always on email and trying to follow up, and your doctor should be too. I don't charge for emails. A lot of practitioners do, but there should be something that, you want to do that. Self-diagnosing, it's almost impossible for us to get a perspective on what's really gone wrong. And I find in general that the more that people know, the more knowledgeable they are, the poorer their decision-making processes are. So the same for me, like I don't design my own programs. I actually run labs, and then I have another doctor interpret them and tell me what to do, and I just listen to them. I don't try to second guess it. So hopefully that, is something that you can think about too. Now, these are the most common questions we get in. I would love to work with you if you're an old patient. If you're a new patient, love to work with you too. Most of the work that I do now is over the phone, okay? Now, I want to kind of shift gears here. We've got another 5-10 minutes. I'm trying to keep these talks shorter too, because I've gotten complaints about them being too long. So I just want to show you something that's super new and super cool and is just been released publicly. So this is a new lab test. It's available from a very old and venerable and well-known company called Doctor's Data. If you've been in the industry for a while, I'm sure you've heard of them. They've been around, I don't know, I think for at least 40 years. And so Doctor's Data is well known for heavy metal testing. They're well known for hormone testing and whatnot, but also quite well known for their comprehensive stool panels that they offer. And they just updated their sort of flagship stool test, and this is coming out right now, and they're going to have the lab kits available October 1st to run. And so I just wanted to share this with my patients because we'll be able to run these on you October 1st. And it's the most comprehensive and well thought out, clinically researched, scientifically validated microbiome test in existence right now. And so to put it into perspective, the current microbiome testing that's done by most of the current labs is, I don't want to say primitive, but very basic. The technology is very basic. There's been a massive leap forward in the way that they run these DNA panels, and then these new platforms, these new testing platforms that are available. And Doctor's Data invested a lot of money in purchasing all these platforms, one of them from a European vendor, one from a US-based company, and they put them all together on this test. And it's quite something, and quite unlike anything that we've seen in the past. So it's a microbiome analysis, and I'll just kind of skim through here the different bacteria that they measure, and there's a lot of them. So the technique is called multiplex PCR, polymerase chain reaction testing. It's a DNA-based test for the microbiome. And it's the latest technology. They're doing it at the same price as the older technology from these other lab companies. So this is quite a coup for Doctor's Data to be able to offer this. And so they offer, you can see these are the commensal or normal bacteria, and they're attempting to map out the microbiome itself. Some of these are kind of famous. Bacteroides, Fragilis is well known. Some of these are a little more obscure. Firmicutes is well known. It made a news splash a couple of years back because they thought for a little while it was the key to obesity. If your Firmicutes was out of balance, you're going to get fat. Turned out to be not as true as they thought. Clostridia, most of you may have heard that term, Clostridia. So these are good Clostridia, not the bad ones. Faecalibacterium plotznitzii, that's a pretty famous one. Very powerful anti-inflammatory. Oh, everyone's heard of lactobacillus, right? That's one that's in a lot of probiotics. So quite a few of these organisms with this, again, multiplex PCR technique. And, I think even as short as a year and a half ago, these tests cost $1,000, $2,000 to run. And the technology has advanced so quickly now, prices have come way, way down. So this is more in the affordable range. I think it's around a $300 to $400 lab now. So anyways, this is what I've got Akkermansia eosinophilia, that's my favorite one. That's the organism that acts as a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It keeps the leaky gut from bothering people and stuff like that. So those are the commensal bacteria, the normal ones, the healthy ones. The test also looks at viruses in the stool, as well as pathogenic bacteria. Okay, now we're getting into the harmful bacteria. And then, of course, it does parasites, blasto, crypto, Entamoeba fragilis, giardia, all the famous parasites are tested as well. Then it does the protozoa. So these are not necessarily, hardcore pathogens, but still ones that are problematic. Entamoeba coli, Entamoeba hartmanni, these kind of bugs. A lot of people will treat these bugs as well. Now, it's really interesting and helpful. They also test for worms, tapeworms, and flukes, roundworms. And again, this is a combination of testing techniques, including various DNA profiles. Tons of worms. And, oftentimes these are missed on the regular stool test. Then they do the standard markers like yeast and cells and mucus and those kinds of things as well. And then let's see, it's more information here. Again, this test is going to be out October 1st, 2019. Then they look for pathogenic bacteria. I mean, the numbers of organisms on this lab are truly staggering. It's incredible they're able to do this for the price point that they are. And this looks more at dysbiosis, and then the famous yeast organisms, Candida albicans, etc. H. pylori, one of my favorite bugs. If you've been listening to me for a while, I love to talk about H. pylori. And you can't tell from looking at the lab because they integrated it all together, but there's a series of either 3 or maybe 4 different lab techniques that are being used simultaneously. DNA testing by PCR, these different platforms. One's called Luminix. There's a 16 messenger RNA thing going on, right? There's a lot of technology behind this to be able to map out the microbiome. So anyways, that's something you should be aware of. If you've been always wondering, I want to test my microbiome, these labs will be available starting in October. I'll give you a little heads up on that. And let's see. We're right around the half an hour mark. I'm going to open it up in case there are any questions before we wrap up. On my travel schedule, in case you happen to be a doctor listening to this, I'll be speaking at the IFM event, the Institute of Functional Medicine event in Seattle on September 18th. And then I'll be speaking at the CASI conference in Nashville at the end of September. And then October, we're going to be in Dublin, Ireland, mid-October. And then the end of October, we'll be in Scottsdale, Arizona, speaking at IFM again. Okay. All right, gang, hopefully this is helpful for you to understand. Oh, wait, there's a couple questions came in. Hang on a second, I missed this. Let me just check here. Sorry, I'm hitting the wrong little box thing here. Does insurance cover any of these tests? I don't know. I don't really participate in the insurance industry, so it really probably depends on your doctor. In my practice, we sell the kits for cash at a cash price, which is greatly discounted. Some practitioners, do work with insurance still. And so what we do in my practice is, since I'm all cash, is you pay a very low cash price for the lab. And then we give you a super bill. And you can turn that into your insurance company to see if they'll reimburse you or not. There are other practices that accept insurance. Other functional medicine docs accept insurance. I don't know how they do it, honestly, because insurance reimbursement is so poor these days, but there are some that do that. But we do it in the form of a super bill where you have to pay for it up front and then see if your insurance company will reimburse you or not. Okay. All right, gang. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and I look forward to doing another one of these soon. Okay. Take care now.